Lisa knelt in the blood-soaked sand and watched the arena official make its declaration. The words barely registered through the fog of pain and exhaustion that filled her mind. She understood that she had won. She understood that the colony worlds were safe. But in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. All she could see was Szeth Torak, lying motionless beside her. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor from both sides. Vethrani doctors surrounded their fallen champion, while human medics ran toward Lisa. She waved them away and began crawling toward her opponent instead. The Vethrani doctors looked up in alarm as she approached. One of them moved to block her path, hissing something in its native language. Lisa could not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. They thought she was coming to finish the job. They thought she wanted to kill their warrior while he lay helpless. She stopped and raised her hands to show she meant no harm. Her voice came out as a broken whisper, but she forced the words out anyway. She said she just wanted to speak to him. The doctors hesitated. Then Szeth Torak stirred on the ground and spoke a single command in his language. The doctors stepped aside. Lisa crawled the last few feet until she was beside him. Up close, she could see the full extent of the damage she had inflicted. His scales were cracked and broken in dozens of places. His limbs were bent at angles that could not be natural. His breathing was shallow and wet with internal bleeding. She had done this to him. And he had done equal damage to her. Zeth turned his head toward the sound of her breathing. His eyes were swollen shut, but she felt like he could still see her somehow. He asked why she had come. The fight was over. She had won. There was nothing left to prove. Lisa told him she had not come to prove anything. She had come because she respected him. He had fought harder than any opponent she had ever faced. He had pushed her to limits she did not know she had. He deserved better than to lie alone in the sand after a battle like that. Zeth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. He said that in 8,000 years, no one had ever defeated a Vethrani champion in single combat. His people would remember this day forever. They would tell stories about the tiny human female who refused to die. Lisa said she did not care about stories. She cared about the thousands of families on those colony worlds who would get to keep their homes. She cared about proving that humanity belonged in this galaxy. And now that the fight was over, she cared about making sure her opponent survived. Szeth made a sound that might have been a laugh. It turned into a cough that brought dark blood to his lips. He said she was strange for a warrior. Most fighters celebrated their victories. They did not crawl across the arena to comfort their defeated enemies. Lisa said she was not most fighters. She said that where she came from, the fight ended when the fight ended. What happened after was a different matter entirely. She had proven her strength in combat. Now she wanted to prove something else. She reached out and took his clawed hand in hers. Szeth tensed at first, surprised by the contact. Then his fingers closed gently around her small human hand. They stayed like that for several seconds. Two warriors, connected by something that went beyond species or rivalry. Lisa asked him if his people would hate humanity now. She asked if this victory would start a war instead of preventing one. Szeth said no. He said the Vethrani respected strength above all else. She had proven that humans possessed strength in abundance. His people would not seek revenge for an honorable defeat. They would seek understanding. They would want to know how such a small species had produced such a formidable fighter. He said he would tell them the truth. He would tell them that humans were not prey animals. They were predators wearing the skin of prey. They had learned to fight by fighting each other for thousands of years. And that constant warfare had forged then into something dangerous. Lisa squeezed his hand and said she hoped that was not all he would tell them. Szeth asked what else he should say. Lisa said he should tell them about this moment. He should tell them that after all the blood and pain, after they had tried their best to kill each other, the human had offered her hand in friendship. She said her people were capable of terrible violence, but they were also capable of mercy. They were not just fighters. They were builders. They wanted to join the galaxy not to conquer it, but to be part of something larger than themselves. Zeth was silent for a long moment. Then he said he would tell them. The medical teams finally intervened, lifting both fighters onto stretchers and rushing them toward the arena's hospital wing. Lisa kept her eyes on Zeth until they were separated by closing doors. Then she let herself relax for the first time in hours. The pain hit her all at once. Every injury she had ignored during the fight suddenly demanded attention. She screamed once and then blacked out. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. Ambassador Perry was sitting beside her, looking exhausted but happy. He told her that the Galactic Assembly had formally recognized humanity's claim to the colony worlds. More than that, the Vethrani Dominion had requested a formal alliance with Earth. They said any species that could produce a warrior like Lisa Monroe deserved their respect and friendship. Lisa asked about Zeth Tarak. Perry smiled and said the Vethrani champion was recovering in another wing of the hospital. His injuries were severe, but he would survive. He had already sent a message for Lisa. Perry handed her a small device that translated Vethrani text. The message was short. It said, "Thank you." It said the Vethrani had learned more about humanity from one fight than they could have learned from 100 diplomatic meetings. It said Zeth Tarak was proud to have faced her in combat, and prouder still to call her a friend. Lisa put the device down and stared at the ceiling. Her body ached in ways she could not describe. The doctors said she would need months of recovery before she could train again. Some of the scars would never fully heal, but she had done what she set out to do. She had proven that humanity belonged in this galaxy, not through speeches or treaties, but through the oldest language in the universe. Through blood and courage and the refusal to quit. Captain Shaw came to visit her that afternoon. He stood at attention beside her bed and saluted. Then he told her that every intelligence agency in the galaxy had updated their assessment of humanity. The new reports all said the same thing. Do not underestimate the humans. Do not threaten their homes. Do not assume their small size means weakness. They are a species forged by war, tempered by struggle, and capable of both terrible violence and unexpected mercy. Lisa smiled and asked if that was a good thing. Shaw said he thought so. He said the galaxy now knew that humanity would fight when pushed. But more importantly, they knew that humanity would offer peace when the fighting was done. That combination of strength and compassion was rare in the universe. It made humanity valuable allies and terrible enemies. Lisa nodded slowly. Then she asked Shaw to do her a favor. She asked him to call her mother on Earth and tell her that the fight was over. Shaw asked what message he should deliver. Lisa thought about everything she had been through. The pain, the fear, the moment when she thought she might actually die on that arena floor. And then the moment when she reached out her hand to her fallen opponent and chose mercy over vengeance. She told Shaw to give her mother a simple message. Tell her we did not break. We bent, and then we snapped back. Shaw nodded and left to make the call. Lisa closed her eyes and let herself rest. The galaxy had witnessed what humanity could do. They had seen the violence and the endurance and the stubborn refusal to surrender. But they had also seen something else. They had seen a human warrior kneel beside her enemy and offer friendship instead of death. That was what Earth had taught her. To fight with everything she had. And to remember that the fighting was never the point. The point was what came after. Peace. Understanding. A hand extended across the void. That was humanity's true power. And now the whole galaxy knew it. The fight had lasted 47 minutes. No honor trial in Vethrani history had ever gone this long. The previous record was 19 minutes, and that had been celebrated in songs and stories for generations. This battle had already more than doubled that, and neither fighter showed any sign of surrender. Lisa could barely see through the blood that dripped into her eyes. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side where Zeth had dislocated her shoulder. She had popped it back into place herself, grinding the joint together with nothing but willpower and a scream that echoed through the silent arena. 3 of her ribs were broken now instead of 2. The claw wounds on her back had gone deep enough to scrape bone, but she was still standing. Zeth Torak was in worse shape than he had ever been in his life. His left knee was shattered from repeated strikes, forcing him to drag the leg behind him when he moved. His right eye was swollen shut to match the left, leaving him nearly blind. The cartilage in his throat was crushed from Lisa's chokes and strikes, making every breath a labored wheeze. Dark blood leaked from wounds all over his body, staining his scales almost black. But he was still standing too. The crowd had stopped cheering long ago. They watched in absolute silence as these 2 broken creatures continued to fight. What had started as entertainment had become something sacred, something terrifying. They were witnessing the true nature of war, stripped of glory and spectacle, reduced to 2 beings refusing to die. Lisa attacked again. She had no energy left for combinations or fancy footwork. She simply walked forward and threw punches. Right hand to the body, left hand to the face. Ignore the pain. Ignore the blood. Keep hitting until something breaks. Zeth Torak met her in the center of the arena. He swung his claws in slow arcs that she barely managed to avoid. His movements were sluggish, almost drunk, but each strike still carried enough power to kill if it landed clean. They exchanged blows, like 2 exhausted boxers in the final round of a championship fight. Technique had been abandoned. Strategy had been forgotten. All that remained was willpower. Lisa took a claw strike across her right thigh that opened the muscle to the bone. She responded with an elbow to Zeth's already damaged throat. He grabbed her by the shoulder and threw her 10 feet across the arena. She hit the sand, rolled, and somehow got back to her feet before he could follow up in the stands. Alien commentators were frantically researching human history. They had dismissed humanity as a primitive species barely worthy of attention. Now, they wanted to understand how this tiny creature could endure so much punishment without breaking. What they found horrified them. Humans came from a planet that was trying to kill them every single day. They had evolved alongside predators that could tear them apart, so they learned to work together and fight back. They had survived ice ages that froze most of their world, so they learned to adapt and endure. They had fought wars against each other continuously for their entire recorded history, so they had thousands of years of practice in the art of violence. One commentator pulled up a list of human conflicts. The numbers were staggering. Millions dead in single wars. Entire generations fed into the grinder of battle. And yet humanity kept fighting. They always kept fighting. No matter how many they lost, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed, they never gave up. This was not a species that knew how to surrender. Back in the arena, Lisa was running on nothing but instinct. Her conscious mind had retreated somewhere deep inside, leaving only the fighter behind. The part of her that had learned to survive in the streets of Detroit. The part that had trained every single day until her body became a weapon. The part that refused to quit because quitting meant death. She shot in for another takedown, wrapping her arms around Zeth's legs. Her injured shoulder screamed in protest. Her broken ribs ground against each other. But she kept driving forward until the massive Vethrani toppled once again. They hit the ground together and immediately began wrestling for position. Zeth's claws tore at her body, adding new wounds to the collection. Lisa worked her way around to his back, seeking the choke than it almost worked before. She got her arm under his chin and squeezed with everything she had left. Zeth thrashed and bucked, trying to throw her off. His movements were weaker now. The blood loss was catching up to him. His superior size and strength meant nothing when he could not breathe. For 30 long seconds, Lisa held on while Zeth slowly stopped fighting. His struggles became twitches. His twitches became stillness. She felt his body go limp beneath her dot. Then he gathered one final burst of strength and rolled onto his back, crushing her beneath his weight. 500 pounds slammed into Lisa's broken ribs. She felt something tear inside her chest. The pain was so intense that her vision went white. Her arms loosened against her will, and Zeth was able to pull free. They lay on the sand together, two broken bodies gasping for air. The arena remained silent. No one knew what to say. This had gone far beyond anything they had ever witnessed. This was not a fight anymore. This was two beings destroying each other through sheer stubbornness. Lisa rolled onto her stomach and began to push herself up. Her arms shook violently. Her vision swam in and out of focus. Blood poured from wounds she could not even feel anymore. But she kept pushing until she made it to her hands and knees. Across from her, Zeth Tarek was doing the same thing. He dragged his shattered knee beneath him and used his arms to lift his massive body. His breathing sounded like rocks scraping together. His eyes were both swollen shut now, leaving him completely blind. They faced each other on hands and knees, neither able to stand. Lisa spoke for the first time since the fight began. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough with blood and exhaustion. She asked him why he would not stay down. Zeth answered with a wet laugh. He said he was Vethrani. His people did not surrender. They fought until they won or died. There was no other way. Lisa understood completely. She told him that humans were the same. Her people had been fighting since before they could write. War was in their blood. Survival was in their bones. She could not quit any more than he could. Zeth was silent for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. He said he had underestimated humanity. He said he had thought they were prey animals who had stumbled into space by accident. He saw now that he was wrong. They were predators too, different from his people, but just as dangerous. Lisa appreciated the compliment. But the fight was not over. She began crawling toward him. Zeth heard her coming and turned to face her. He could not see anything through his swollen eyes, but he could hear her hands scraping through the sand. He raised one clawed hand and waited. Lisa reached striking distance and stopped. She studied his posture, looking for any opening she could exploit. His guard was weak on the left side, where his shoulder had been damaged. If she could get one more clean shot to his throat, she might be able to end this. She gathered the last of her strength and lunged, her fist connected with Zeth's throat at the exact moment his claw connected with her side. They both collapsed into the sand, tangled together in a heap of blood and broken bodies. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The arena held its breath. Then Lisa's hand twitched. Her fingers dug into the sand. She began, slowly and painfully, to push herself up again. Zeth Torak did not move. The crowd watched in disbelief as the tiny human female rose from the ground one more time. She swayed on her knees, unable to stand, barely able to stay upright at all. But she was up. Her opponent was not. The arena official walked onto the sand to check on Zeth Torak. It pressed a device to his neck and studied the readings. Then it looked up at the crowd with an expression that might have been shock. Zeth Torak was still alive. But he could not continue. The official raised one blue arm toward Lisa Monroe. The fight was over. Humanity had won. The arena official was a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. It walked to the center of the sand and raised one hand for silence. The crowd settled into an eager hush. Everyone wanted to hear the rules, even though most believed this fight would not last long enough for rules to matter. The official spoke in the common tongue that all species understood. It said this was an honor trial under ancient law. Combat would continue until one fighter died, surrendered, or could no longer continue. No weapons were allowed. Only natural abilities and learned techniques. The will of the fighters would determine the fate of 3 human colony worlds. 50,000 spectators leaned forward in their seats. Ze Tarak stood at his starting position, his dark green scales gleaming under the arena lights. He was 7 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 500 pounds. His claws were 6 inches long and sharp enough to cut through metal. His yellow eyes fixed on Lisa with the patient hunger of a predator who knew his prey could not escape. Lisa stood at her position 30 feet away. She rolled her shoulders and bounced lightly on her feet, warming up muscles that would need to work perfectly in the next few minutes. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her breathing stayed calm. She had been in this mental space before. The world narrowed down to her opponent and nothing else existed. The official dropped its hand. Zeth Tarak charged. The ground shook under his weight as he crossed the distance between them. His mouth opened to reveal rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. He swung his right arm in a massive arc that would have taken Lisa's head off if it connected. It did not connect. Lisa moved like water. She had seen the attack coming from the moment his shoulder tensed. She slipped to the left and let his claws pass within inches of her face. His momentum carried him forward, and she used that moment to strike. Her right hand drove into the soft tissue behind his knee. Zeth Tarak stumbled. Crowd gasped. No one had ever made the great champion stumble before. Zeth recovered quickly and spun around with a backhand swipe that forced Lisa to dive away. She rolled across the sand and came up in a fighting stance, already moving, never staying in one place for more than a second. This was the style she had practiced for 20 years. Constant motion, constant angles. Make the bigger opponent chase you until they get tired or frustrated. Then make them pay for every mistake. Zeth Tarak attacked again. He was faster than Lisa had expected, but she was still faster. She ducked under a sweeping claw and landed a kick to his inner thigh, right where the nerve cluster was located. The blow would have dropped a human instantly. Zeth merely grunted and kept coming, but Lisa saw the slight change in his movement. The leg was not working as well as before. The damage was small, but it was real. The first 3 minutes of the fight continued in this pattern. Zeth attacked with devastating power, and Lisa avoided or deflected every blow while landing small strikes of her own. None of her hits did serious damage, but they added up. A knee strike here, an elbow to the ribs there, a palm strike to the throat that made him cough. Death by 1,000 cuts. The crowd grew quieter as the minutes passed. This was not what they had expected. The tiny human female was not dying. She was not even losing. She was fighting back with a technical skill that most of them had never seen before. In the 4th minute, Zeth Tarak finally landed a blow. His left hand caught Lisa's shoulder as she tried to spin away from a combination. The impact sent her flying across the arena. She hit the sand hard and felt 2 of her ribs crack on the left side. Pain exploded through her body. The crowd erupted in cheers. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The human was down. The execution could begin. Zeth Tarak walked toward her with confidence in every step. He had seen this scene many times before. The opponent on the ground, broken and afraid, waiting for the end. He raised his clawed hand for the killing blow. Lisa got up. Her ribs screamed in protest. Every breath felt like fire. But she got up anyway, because that was what Monroe women did. They got up. They always got up. Zeth paused, genuinely surprised. His opponents usually stayed down after a hit like that. Some of them surrendered immediately. This small creature was standing again, blood dripping from a cut on her forehead. Her left arm held close to protect her damaged ribs, and she was smiling. Lisa attacked. She came in low and fast, driving her right elbow into the same knee she had targeted before. Zeth's leg buckled, and for one precious second, his head dropped to her level. Lisa pivoted and threw a Muay Thai elbow strike directly into his eye socket. Zeth Torak roared in pain and staggered backward. His left eye was already swelling shut. The crowd fell absolutely silent. No one had ever hurt the champion like this. No one had ever made him bleed. But a thin line of dark blood now ran down his face, and his movements had become more cautious. He was still the stronger fighter by far, but he was no longer certain of victory. Lisa pressed her advantage. She knew that her window was small. Her ribs were broken, and every movement sent waves of agony through her body. She could not fight at this pace for much longer. She needed to end this soon, or her body would fail before his did. She launched a combination that pushed Zeth back toward the arena wall. Left jab to distract. Right cross to the damaged eye. Low kick to the injured knee. He blocked some of the strikes, but not all of them. His reactions were slower now. The pain was affecting his concentration. Lisa saw her opening. She faked a high strike and then dove for his legs, wrapping her arms around his knees in a wrestling takedown. It was like trying to topple a tree. Her muscles strained against his massive weight. Her broken ribs ground against each other. But Zeth Torak was not built for this kind of fight. His species fought standing up, using their superior reach and strength. He did not know how to defend against someone trying to take him to the ground. He fell. The impact shook the arena floor. 500 pounds of Vethrani warrior crashed into the sand with Lisa still wrapped around his legs. She scrambled immediately, climbing up his body before he could recover. Her training took over. Years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu guided her movements as she sought a dominant position. Zeth thrashed and clawed at her. His talons raked across her back, leaving deep wounds that would scar for life. Lisa screamed but did not let go. She got her arm around his neck and began to squeeze. A rear naked choke. The same technique that had ended countless fights back on Earth. Cut off the blood to the brain. Put the opponent to sleep. Zeth Torak was not human. His neck was thicker, and his arteries were in different places. The choke did not work perfectly, but it did work partially. His struggles became weaker. His movements became slower. Then he gathered all his remaining strength and threw her off. Lisa hit the sand and rolled to her feet, gasping for air. Her back was on fire from the claw wounds. Her ribs felt like broken glass inside her chest. Blood soaked through her combat suit from a dozen different injuries. Zeth Torak rose slowly. His left eye was swollen, completely shut now. His knee barely supported his weight. His breathing came in ragged gasps from the damage to his throat. They faced each other across 20 feet of blood-stained sand. The arena was silent. 50,000 aliens watched in shock as these two broken fighters prepared to continue. This was not what anyone had expected. This was not entertainment. This was something else entirely. This was war. Lisa spat blood onto the sand and raised her fist. Zeth. Torak bared his teeth and raised his claws. Round one was over. Neither of them was finished yet. The training room was empty, except for Lisa and the punching bag that hung from the ceiling. She had been hitting it for 2 hours straight. Her knuckles were raw and her shoulders burned, but she did not stop. Every strike was a word in a language she had spoken since childhood. Every combination was a sentence. She was rehearsing a conversation she would have with Zeth Torak, and the only grammar was violence. Sergeant Danny Cole watched from the doorway. He was her closest friend on the security team, a quiet man from Oklahoma with a gentle voice and hands that could break bones. They had trained together for 3 years back on Earth, and he knew her better than almost anyone. He told her she needed to rest. Lisa threw another combination and said she would rest when the fight was over. Danny walked into the room and caught the bag to stop it swinging. He looked at her with worry in his eyes. He said the whole station was talking about her. Every alien species had an opinion. Most of them thought she would die in the first minute. The betting pools gave her odds of 200 to 1 against surviving. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead and asked what odds Danny would give her. He smiled for the first time in days. He said he never bet against her. They trained together for the next 3 hours. Danny played the role of the Vethrani, using padding on his arms to simulate the extra reach and weight. Lisa practiced her footwork, her angles, her entries. She could not match Zeth Tarak in strength. She could not match him in size. But she could be faster. She could be smarter. She could make him fight her kind of fight instead of his dot later that night. She met with counselor Myra Voss. The xenopsychologist had been assigned to help Lisa prepare mentally for the trial. Mira was a small woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through walls. She had spent 20 years studying how the human mind worked under extreme stress. Myra asked Lisa why she had volunteered Dot. Lisa thought about the question for a long moment. She could have given many answers. She could have talked about duty and honor and protecting humanity's future. But those were not the real reasons. She told Myra about her mother. Gloria Munro had raised Lisa, alone in one of the worst neighborhoods in Detroit. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and never complained about anything. When Lisa was 12, 3 men broke into their apartment in the middle of the night. Gloria grabbed a kitchen knife and fought them off while Lisa hid in the closet. She took a beating that put her in the hospital for a week, but she never stopped fighting until those men ran away. Lisa learned something that night. She learned that size did not matter. Strength did not matter. What mattered was the refusal to quit. What mattered was fighting until your body gave out, and then fighting some more. Her mother had a saying. She repeated whenever times got hard. We do not break. We bend, and then we snap back. Lisa volunteered because someone had to. Because those colony worlds were full of families just like hers. Because humanity needed to show the galaxy that they would not be pushed around by anyone. No matter how big or how powerful Dot, Myra nodded and wrote something in her notes. Then she asked Lisa if she was afraid. Lisa said yes. She was terrified. But fear was just another enemy, and she had been fighting enemies her whole life. The next day, Lisa studied everything the station's database had on Vethrani physiology. She learned that their scales were thickest on their chest and back, but thinner on the inner arms and behind the knees. She learned that they had a nerve cluster in their inner thigh that could cause intense pain if struck correctly. She learned that their necks, despite looking heavily armored, were vulnerable to choking techniques if you could get behind them. She also studied Zeth Tarak specifically. He had fought in 19 honor trials and won all of them. 14 of his opponents had died. The other 5 had surrendered after suffering injuries so severe they never fully recovered. He was considered one of the greatest warriors in Vethrani history, a living legend among his people. But Lisa found something interesting in the footage. Zeth. Tarak had never faced an opponent who lasted more than 8 minutes against him. He had never been pushed to his limits. He had never been in a real fight where the outcome was uncertain. He was so dominant that every battle was essentially a performance. He had never been truly tested. Lisa intended to test him. That evening, she called her mother on Earth. The signal took almost an hour to travel between the station and home, so they could not have a real conversation. Lisa just talked. Knowing her mother would receive the message eventually, she told Gloria about the arena and the Vethrani and what she was about to do. She told her mother not to worry. She told her about all the training she had done and all the patterns she had found. She told her she loved her. Then she recited the family motto: "We do not break. We bend and then we snap back." The day of the trial arrived. Lisa put on her combat suit and looked at herself in the mirror. She was small. She was soft. She was everything the galaxy thought humanity was. But beneath her skin was bone and muscle forged by evolution on one of the deadliest planets in the known universe. Earth was a world of predators and disasters, of constant competition and endless war. Humanity had survived ice ages and plagues and conflicts that killed millions. They had climbed to the top of their food chain not through size or strength but through intelligence and persistence and an absolute refusal to die. Lisa was the product of all that. History. Captain Shaw and Danny Cole escorted her to the arena entrance. Other members of the team lined the corridor, each one saluting as she passed. Ambassador Perry waited at the final door. He shook her hand and thanked her for what she was doing. Lisa told him to save the thanks for after she won. The door opened, and she stepped into a tunnel that led toward blinding light and the roar of a crowd. The grand arena of the Convergence held 50,000 spectators from 100 different species. They had all come to watch a human die. Lisa walked toward the light with her head held high behind her. Danny Cole whispered something she could barely hear over the noise. He said, "Give them hell." Lisa smiled and kept walking. The arena floor was made of hard-packed sand, and it stretched out before her like a golden ocean. On the far side, a massive gate opened, and Zeth Tarak emerged to thunderous applause. He raised his clawed hands above his head, and the crowd screamed his name. Lisa stepped out of her tunnel and into the light. The applause died instantly. 50,000 aliens looked down at the tiny human female standing alone on the sand, and they did not know whether to laugh or feel sorry for her. Lisa took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She had fought bullies and criminals and trained soldiers. She had fought her way out of poverty and through the ranks of the military. She had fought every single day of her life to prove that she belonged. This was just one more fight, and she was not going to lose. Lisa Monroe had never seen so many aliens in one place. The Galactic Convergence Station stretched for miles in every direction, a massive ring of metal and glass floating in the darkness of space. Creatures of every shape and size walked through its corridors. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no faces at all, and all of them looked at the small group of humans like they were insects that had somehow wandered into a palace. She was part of a 12-person security team protecting Ambassador Daniel Perry on humanity's first diplomatic mission to the galactic community. Earth had made contact with alien life only 3 years ago, and now they were here to ask for a seat at the table. The Galactic Assembly was a coalition of over 200 spacefaring species, and humanity wanted to join. They wanted recognition. They wanted respect. But looking at the dismissive glances from passing aliens, Lisa knew they had a long way to go. Ambassador Perry was a calm man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat back on Earth, negotiating peace treaties and trade deals between nations. Now he faced the greatest challenge of his career. The fate of human expansion into space depended on these talks. Captain Kevin Shaw led the security team. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that rarely smiled. He had served in 3 wars back on Earth and had the scars to prove it. Lisa respected him deeply. He had trained her personally when she first joined the team, and he never treated her as less capable because she was a woman. In his eyes, skill was all that mattered. The trouble started On the third day of negotiations, the Vethrani Dominion sent a delegation to challenge humanity's claim to 3 colony worlds in the outer reach. The Vethrani were reptilian creatures that stood 7 feet tall on average. Their scales were thick as armor, and their claws could tear through steel. They had conquered dozens of worlds and feared nothing in the galaxy. Their lead diplomat, a scarred old warrior named Kethvorn, stood before the assembly and declared that humans had no right to those worlds. He said humanity was a primitive species, barely worthy of notice. He said they had stumbled onto those planets by accident and lacked the strength to hold them. Ambassador Perry responded with patience and reason. He presented evidence of human settlements, of families who had built homes on those distant worlds. He spoke of peace and cooperation. He offered to share the territory. Kethvorn laughed at him. The Vethrani did not share. They did not compromise. They took what they wanted, and anyone who disagreed could face them in battle. But the assembly had rules against open warfare between member states and applicants. So Kethvorn invoked an ancient tradition called the honor trials. It was ritual combat meant to settle disputes without full-scale war. Single combat between champions. The winner would claim the disputed territory. The assembly approved the request. Humanity had 72 hours to select the champion or forfeit their colonies. 3 worlds. Thousands of families. Everything they had built in the outer reach would belong to the Vethrani. Ambassador Perry called an emergency meeting in their quarters. The entire delegation gathered around a table, their faces grim. Captain Shaw played footage of previous honor trials on a display screen. They watched Vethrani warriors tear apart opponents from a dozen different species. Creatures with 4 arms. Creatures covered in natural armor. Creatures twice the size of any human. The Vethrani defeated them all. No species smaller than the Vethrani had ever beaten them in the honor trials. That record stretched back 8,000 years. The room fell silent. Captain Shaw said he would volunteer. He was the strongest and most experienced fighter on the team. But Lisa watched the footage carefully, and she saw something the others missed. The Vethrani were powerful, but they were also predictable. They relied on their size and strength. They attacked in straight lines. They never expected their opponents to survive long enough to study their patterns. Lisa had spent her entire adult life studying patterns. She stood up and said she would go. Everyone stared at her. She was the youngest member of the team and the lowest ranking. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 140 pounds. The idea of her facing a 7-foot reptilian warrior seemed like suicide. But Lisa did not sit back down. She told them about her background. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood in Detroit, where fighting was a way of life. She had her first real fight at age 8 against a boy twice her size who tried to steal her shoes. She won. She kept winning. By the time she was 16, she had studied boxing, wrestling, and 3 different martial arts. The military found her when she was 19 and gave her discipline to match her natural talent. She became an instructor in combatives, teaching soldiers how to kill with their bare hands. She had never lost a fight in her life. Captain Shaw argued against it. He said this was different. This was not some bar fight or training exercise. This was combat to the death against an alien warrior bred for battle. Lisa agreed with him. She said it was completely different. She said that was exactly why she should go. The Vethrani would expect a large male human. They would prepare for strength against strength. They would not know what to do with a small female who moved like water and hit like a hammer. Ambassador Perry looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked her to demonstrate. Lisa stepped into the center of the room and invited Captain Shaw and 2 other soldiers to attack her at once. They hesitated, but she insisted. 3 trained military personnel came at her from different directions. 12 seconds later, all 3 were on the ground. Ambassador Perry made his decision. The registration chamber was cold and smelled like metal. Lisa walked in alone, wearing the simple combat suit that would be her only protection in the arena. A patch on her shoulder showed Earth's flag. The registration official was a small gray creature with too many eyes. It looked at her documentation and then looked at her like she had made some kind of mistake. Behind her, she heard laughter. A group of aliens had gathered to see the human champion. They pointed at her and made sounds that needed no translation. They thought this was a joke. They thought humanity had given up already and sent this tiny female as an insult to the Vethrani. Lisa ignored them. She completed her registration and received her confirmation. The honor trial would begin in 48 hours. As she left the chamber, she passed a massive Vethrani warrior standing in the corridor. His scales were dark green, almost black, and a long scar ran down the left side of his face. He looked down at her with yellow eyes full of contempt. This was Zeth Torak, her opponent. He said something in his language that made the aliens around him laugh. Then he spoke in the common tongue so she would understand. He called her a soft little prey animal. He said he would try to make her death quick, out of respect for her bravery. However foolish, Lisa looked up at him without fear. She smiled and said she would see him in the arena. Then she walked away, carrying 10,000 years of human warfare in her muscle memory. And the entire galaxy had no idea what was coming.